Hi, my name is Greg, and this is a demo of CodeCollaborator, an easy-to-use tool that takes the grunt work out of peer code review. CodeCollaborator is a server-based application that provides a browser-based user interface. I'll show that in a moment, but I'm going to start by using a client-side utility I have here on my desktop. In addition to this cross-platform UI, CodeCollaborator has other client-side tools as well, including an Eclipse plugin, a Visual Studio add-in, a Windows printer driver, a cross-platform command line utility, and plugins for the P4V and P4Win utilities. A key feature in CodeCollaborator is the integration it provides with version control tools, so that CodeCollaborator can do the work of figuring out the exact versions of a file to display for comparison in a review instead of you having to do that. And CodeCollaborator has integrated support for a large number of version control tools. Further, if you are using a version control tool that CodeCollaborator does not directly support, you can still get great results by using its command line utility to directly select files for comparison in a review. For this demo, I'll use Subversion, although the workflow would be similar for any other version control system. And throughout this demo, I'll be switching back and forth between my screen and the screen of my coworker Bob. Photos are shown in the upper right corner to help you keep track of whose session you are viewing. By clicking Add Changes, I'll have CodeCollaborator create a review based on locally changed files in my working directory. Note, however, I could have chosen a different technique. CodeCollaborator can work with revisions and change lists, differences between branches, etc. I'll put in a title for the review, and then CodeCollaborator displays the files that were modified in my working directory. It found that out by directly querying the version control tool, saving me the trouble of doing that. Next, I also have an opportunity to browse to anywhere in the file system to add files to the review. I show this just to make the point that you can select any kind of file in CodeCollaborator for review. It does not have to be a file that's in a version control system. After I click the Finish button, you'll notice the next thing I see is my browser. What happened behind the scenes is that the client-side utility that I started with told the CodeCollaborator server to create a new review, and then it collected the files for that review and sent them up the wire to the CodeCollaborator server where they will be cached. With that bootstrapping of the process completed, the client-side utility then starts up my default browser with the correct URL, so that I can use CodeCollaborator's browser-based UI to complete the act of creating the review and then, of course, perform the review. Completing the review creation process takes just a few clicks. I'm going to add my coworker Bob to the review, and then I just need to click the big Begin Review button. I did all of that creation of the review while logged on to CodeCollaborator in Chrome with my user ID as Greg. Now I'm going to switch over to Firefox and log in as Bob to show you what his experience as a reviewer looks like. After Bob logs in, he sees his home page in CodeCollaborator, which lists all reviews in which he is a participant. There are some additional links that allow him to create a new review or see his review activity, etc. There is also a button for his personal RSS feed of notifications. When Bob clicks that button, he sees all the notifications that CodeCollaborator has sent to him. Naturally, if Bob has specified his email address in his CodeCollaborator user preferences, then he will also receive these notifications as email messages. We wanted to provide a variety of ways for users to get notifications from CodeCollaborator. At the top of the list, Bob sees the notification for the newly created review. Returning to his home screen in CodeCollaborator, Bob can click a link to go straight into that new review. The review summary screen has general information about the review at the top, followed by sections that list the participants, defects, chat, and then the review materials. This is where Bob can see information about the version control system, if the files came from a version control system, and also about each file that is in the review. Information is included on whether each file is new, or is being deleted, or has been modified. When Bob wants to review an individual file, all he has to do is simply click the link for that file, and a new window opens in his browser. This is where the rubber meets the road. This file comparison window is where the majority of the time is spent within CodeCollaborator. At the top is a toolbar, and then under that is information about the revisions of the file that are being displayed. Since this review contains locally modified files from a Subversion environment, you can see that the older or before version of the file is listed with its revision ID on the left. The newer or after version of the file on the right is shown as uploaded changes. The majority of the window is used to display the contents of the two file revisions. Color coding is used to highlight the differences between the two. The yellow background indicates that a line has been modified, with darker yellow highlighting used for the specific characters within that line that have changed. When Bob scrolls down a bit further, he sees a block of lines with a green background. This indicates that these lines were added in the newer version of the file on the right. If lines had been deleted in the newer version, they would be shown with a red background. That's all fairly standard file comparison stuff. What CodeCollaborator adds on is its ability to track conversations about the code. For example, if Bob has a question about line 36, all he has to do is click and then start typing. If he has another question about line 41, again, all he has to do is click that line and then start typing. Note that there is no pop-up dialog to dismiss or window focus change. CodeCollaborator makes commenting during a review as seamless as possible. Also, note that these conversations are tracked individually by line number within this file. All of this has been done in Firefox, where I'm actually logged in as Bob. I'm going to switch back over to Chrome, where I'm logged in with my user ID as Greg. I can see that the review summary screen has changed. In the review materials section, each review participant has a column, and I can see at a glance that Bob has put in some commentary on the primeutils.java source file, specifically on lines 36 and 41. More importantly, these yellow chat icons with the red exclamation points indicate that I have not read the latest in those conversations. This is really powerful because it allows me to go away from a review for a while, at the end of the day, or for lunch, or whatever, and then come back and be able to easily see across all files, across all conversations within those files, where do I need to go in order to get caught up on what was said in the review while I was away. So it is sort of like a newsgroup notification feature. As you would expect, when I click the icon, a new window opens up, this time in Chrome, since that's where I'm logged on with my user ID. This is the same information that Bob saw, but with a slight difference. Bob set his user preferences to display a side-by-side file comparison. I've set mine, however, to display an over-under, or some people call this an inline file comparison. The concept is simple. The line numbers for the two file versions are displayed side by side over here on the left. And then the green and red background colors are used to show the differences. Lines with a green background only exist in the newer version of the file, and lines with a red background only exist in the older version. Over in the chat pane on the left, the color yellow is used to highlight chat comments that I have not yet read. I'll respond to Bob's first comment, and notice that when I do, the yellow highlighting goes away. CodeCollaborator assumes that since you responded, you read the comment. Another option is to click the Mark Read button. If I put in a comment and then later reconsider and decide that's not what I wanted in that comment, then I can hover the mouse next to that comment, which will display a red X. Clicking that X will redact the comment. It's not deleted completely because CodeCollaborator must maintain an audit trail. Before I respond to Bob's comment on line 41, I want to change this display so that we can see both windows. I'll have my window in Chrome over on the left and Bob's window in Firefox over on the right. Notice that when I submit my comment over in the window in Chrome, Bob's Firefox window updates automatically. I didn't even have to give it focus. That's because, in addition to the newsgroup style notification feature I mentioned earlier, this chat pane also updates in real time. That way, if multiple review participants are in a review at the same time, they can see each other's comments and carry on conversations. So essentially, this is an instant messaging client hanging off the side of a file comparison window. The end result of the conversation about line 36 is that Bob and I have agreed there is a bug in this new code. So Bob is going to enter a defect into the review. Defects are sort of like chat comments with additional data and significance. You can configure CodeCollaborator to collect custom data for each defect. On my demo server, you can see I've set up two drop-downs to collect type and severity information. But you don't have to use type and severity. You could collect different data, or no additional data about defects at all. Bob puts in his commentary to describe the defect, and then he clicks the Submit button. You'll notice that what gets recorded is not only his commentary about the defect, but also a defect ID number for tracking purposes. So, to recap, this chat pane has the newsgroup style notification feature, and it works in real time like an IM client, and it provides an audit trail of everything that has been said about this particular line of code in this particular file in this review. And finally, it displays this information about defects that have been found during the code review. Two additional things to know about defects in CodeCollaborator. First, we use the term defect very broadly. In this particular example, the logic in this if check is an algorithmic bug. The code will return an incorrect value. But a defect in CodeCollaborator doesn't necessarily have to be a bug. It could be anything that requires a change to the file. Just a few examples would be an incorrect comment, or a comment that is missing, or an opportunity to use a different API, or a piece of code that just needs to be refactored. So again, the term defect in CodeCollaborator means anything that in order to resolve it requires a change to the file. The second thing to mention about defects is that CodeCollaborator is not a bug or issue or work tracking system. CodeCollaborator is a code review tool. The purpose of defects in CodeCollaborator is just to help you track what happened during the code review itself. I'll show you the interface CodeCollaborator provides to bug tracking tools later in this demo. Alright, Bob has entered the defect and now he's finished reviewing this file. He clicks the Done button to close this window, and now he's back at the review summary screen. The final section of the screen is labeled Moving On, which is exactly what Bob is now ready to do. Bob has two choices. The Finished button is available if Bob is ready to sign off on the review. In other words, if Bob clicks Finished, he's telling CodeCollaborator, I think what I saw was okay, we're good to go on this review, and I'm done with this review. All reviewers must click the Finished button before CodeCollaborator will consider the review to be complete. But Bob's not ready to do that yet on this review. Notice that he also has a Waiting button. Clicking this Waiting button allows Bob to indicate that he wants to stop participating in the review for now, and then get a notification when a specific type of event occurs in the future. Bob is anticipating that a new file version will be uploaded to this review to resolve the defect that he reported. So he selects File Activity from the drop-down list and then clicks the Waiting button. On his home page in CodeCollaborator, the entry for the review is updated to indicate he currently is waiting for other participants to take action in this review. I'm going to switch back over to my session now and make that file activity that Bob is waiting for occur. I have primeutils.java open in the Eclipse IDE, and I also have the CodeCollaborator Eclipse plugin installed. Having that CodeCollaborator plugin provides me with a whole host of cool features right here in the Eclipse IDE, including code review defect information listed in the Eclipse Problems window. Further, the editor displays the CodeCollaborator defect icon in the left margin of this file. I'll make the change to the code. I'm actually going to paste this in so that you don't have to watch me type. Now that the fix is in place, I'll save the file, and while I could go back to the client-side tool that I used to initially create this review, since I have the Eclipse plugin for CodeCollaborator, I don't have to do that. Instead, I can add this latest version of the file to that existing review from right here in the Eclipse IDE. As a side benefit of doing that, the CodeCollaborator Eclipse plugin will open a review summary window right here in the Eclipse IDE. This window has a similar layout to the browser-based UI for CodeCollaborator, and it allows an Eclipse user to stay within the IDE in order to do their code reviews. CodeCollaborator even leverages the native Eclipse file comparison window. Now I'll switch back over to Bob's session in Firefox. Refreshing his list of notifications, Bob can see that new files have been added to the review. Bob switches back over to his CodeCollaborator homepage, where he can click the link again to go back into that review. Scrolling down to the Review Materials section, Bob can easily see that it was just the primutils.java file that had a new revision uploaded in this latest change to the review. Clicking the link, the file comparison window opens again. And notice that Bob sees only the most recent changes highlighted. That's because the comparison is now being done between the two most recent versions of the file that have been put into this review. It is important to note, however, that Bob has complete control over which two revisions of the file are shown. All of the file revisions are in this drop-down menu, and Bob can pick exactly what shows on the left and on the right side of this file comparison window. So when he chooses to show the original base version of the file on the left and this latest upload on the right, then all of the changes are highlighted. Bob now switches back to a comparison of the two most recent versions of the file. Note that the line number where Bob reported the defect has changed. When Bob reported this defect, the if check was on line number 36. Now it is on line number 40 because 4 lines of code were inserted above it in order to resolve the problem. But note that CodeCollaborator is smart enough to figure that out, and it moves the conversation and the defect information to the correct line number in the new version of the file. Bob is happy with the fix to the code, so he clicks the Mark Fixed link to resolve the defect, and then the display is updated accordingly. In the real world, things are not always this simple. To show you a couple of other options that CodeCollaborator provides, I'll have Bob undo his marking of this defect as fixed. The first additional option is to click this delete link and just delete the defect. That's not the right thing to do here, since there was a defect in this code prior to this newest revision of the file. The delete defect feature is instead used for correcting misunderstandings. In other words, if someone enters a defect and then after further discussion decides that the code does not really have a defect after all, then delete is the correct approach to use. An audit trail is maintained to indicate that a defect was reported and then was later removed. The other option is to track the defect externally. The CodeCollaborator server can be configured with URL patterns in order to provide shortcuts to any bug or issue tracking system that provides a browser-based UI. Clicking the Track Externally link changes this form. A link is displayed to create a bug in Bug Tracker. Clicking that link causes CodeCollaborator to open another browser tab or window with the URL that was specified as the data entry screen for the bug tracking tool. I've configured this demo server to point to the public instance of Jira, but as mentioned, you can use this technique with any bug or issue tracking system that has a browser-based UI. The idea here is to provide quick access to the screen where data entry is done in order to create a new bug. I'm not going to take the time to do that now, but at the end of that process, your bug tracking system will provide a unique identifier for that bug. That unique bug identifier is what is filled into the external name field here in CodeCollaborator. And then after the Mark External button is clicked, the defect has now been resolved in CodeCollaborator. Using the URL pattern that you configure, CodeCollaborator creates a link to the entry in the bug tracking system to provide quick and easy access from CodeCollaborator back into the actual bug. Having done that, Bob is now finished with this review. He clicks the Done button to close the file comparison window. Back over on the review summary screen, he clicks the Finished button, and since he was the only reviewer on this review, this code review is now complete. Now that the review is finished, Bob wants to take a look at a report that describes what happened during this review. CodeCollaborator has a pre-built report for displaying detailed information about a specific review. Bob just has to type in the review ID number and CodeCollaborator displays the report. The Overview section includes the total elapsed time and also includes the total person time. That person time is broken out further here in the Participants section so that Bob can see how much time each participant spent doing the review. Note that the role the participant played in the review is also displayed. Roles are important in CodeCollaborator because they define the specific rights and responsibilities that a participant has in a code review. Scrolling down further, Bob sees the defect log, which lists all defects across all files. And then below that is the materials summary section, which is broken down into two subsections. One that shows statistics just using the final versions of the files in the review, and the other showing those same figures across all file revisions. This includes a significant amount of information about the materials that were reviewed, including things such as the number of lines of code, the number of lines that were changed, the defect density, etc. Scrolling down further, there's a list displayed that shows each file that was in the review, and then finally all the chat conversations that occurred are displayed. The content and layout of this report is fixed, and we know that many users like to create their own reports with their own selections for the content. To meet that need, CodeCollaborator also includes customizable reports. These customizable reports initially display based on default selections, but let's have Bob make some changes. Scrolling up to the top, Bob sees all of the columns of review-oriented data available in CodeCollaborator. He can then go through this list and for every column indicate whether he wants it in the report or not. Scrolling down a bit, the next section displays a set of filters. This essentially allows Bob to control the where clause for the query that's built to display the report results. For example, Bob can control the date range for the report. Scrolling down again displays a set of additional report options for controlling things such as the report title and sort order. After Bob clicks Save, a report is generated based on his selections and is displayed in this table at the bottom of the page. It is important to note, however, that Bob has additional options. He can export this data to a CSV file and open it up, for example, in a tool like Excel, where he can then slice and dice the data any way he chooses. Or, another option is to click the SQL link. CodeCollaborator then displays the underlying SQL query that it used to generate the report results. This query can then be taken over into any general purpose reporting tool, Business Objects or Crystal or whatever, to generate a report. That concludes this brief demo of CodeCollaborator. Thanks for listening. To learn more and to download a free trial copy of CodeCollaborator, please visit our website at smartbear.com.